Japan is a nation on edge. The tension is almost palpable, woven into the daily routines of millions. In the heart of Tokyo, people gather around glowing screens, searching for answers in the latest headlines, their faces marked by worry and uncertainty. Once a symbol of peace and economic strength, Japan's post-war identity was built on pacifism. The nation rebuilt itself from the ashes of conflict, embracing a future defined by stability, prosperity, and a commitment to never repeat the mistakes of the past. But in the summer of 2025, unease has replaced calm. The familiar rhythm of city life is now underscored by a sense of vulnerability, as if the ground beneath the nation's feet has shifted. The world feels more dangerous than it has in decades. Tensions simmer across continents, and the threat of conflict looms larger than ever before, casting a long shadow over daily life. Japan now faces tough questions about its safety and its place in a turbulent world. Leaders debate how to protect the nation, while citizens wonder what the future holds for their families and communities. This is the result of years of mounting pressure, not a sudden crisis. The warning signs have been there, subtle at first, then impossible to ignore, as the world's balance of power has shifted. Major power competition has returned, and the war in Ukraine proved that large-scale conflict is not a thing of the past. The images of tanks rolling across borders and cities under siege have left a deep impression on the Japanese public. For Japan, this was a warning. International norms can be shattered overnight. The rules that once seemed unbreakable are now fragile, and alliances that felt secure are being tested. Fighter jets scramble more often, their engines roaring across the sky as a constant reminder of the nation's vigilance. Coast Guard vessels patrol contested waters, their presence a daily assertion of sovereignty in regions where tensions run high. And headlines are filled with missile tests by neighboring countries. Each launch sends ripples of anxiety through the population, fueling debates about national defense. The sense of stability has vanished, replaced by constant tension. Even the busiest streets feel quieter, as if the city itself is holding its breath. Japan now finds itself on the front lines of a shifting geopolitical order, surrounded by assertive neighbors. The nation's strategic location has become both a shield and a target. The change is profound, challenging the nation's post-1945 identity. The memories of war linger, and the lessons of history are being re-examined in a new light. The pacifist constitution, once a point of pride, is now hotly debated. Some see it as a shield, others as a limitation in a world that has grown more unpredictable. Can Japan remain passive as its neighbors build up their militaries? The arms race in the region is accelerating, and the pressure to respond is mounting. Can it rely on others for protection? The alliance with the United States is strong, but questions about self-reliance and sovereignty are growing louder. These questions dominate public discourse in Tokyo. In homes, cafes, and on social media, people debate the path forward, aware that the choices made now will echo for generations. Japan is being forced to adapt, and its choices will shape not only its own future, but the stability of the entire Indo-Pacific. The world is watching, and the pressure to act is immense. The stakes have never been higher. In this moment of uncertainty, Japan stands at a crossroads, its next steps set to define an era. Every year, Japan's Ministry of Defense releases its highly anticipated Defense White Paper, a document that sets the tone for the nation's security outlook and strategic priorities. The 2025 edition stands out as the most sobering and urgent yet, declaring that Japan now faces its most severe and complex security environment since the end of World War II, an era marked by uncertainty and rising tensions. For the first time, the report explicitly names China, North Korea, and Russia as the primary threats to Japan's security, abandoning the diplomatic ambiguity of previous years and making the risks unmistakably clear. It details a pattern of provocations, rapid military buildups, and repeated violations of international norms by each of these neighboring countries, painting a stark picture of the challenges Japan faces. By naming names so directly, Japan signals to both its citizens and the world that it is prepared to respond firmly and decisively to any threat. This approach marks a sharp break from Japan's traditionally cautious and understated diplomacy, signaling a new era in its foreign policy. The delicate balancing act between maintaining security and preserving vital economic ties, especially with China, Japan's largest trading partner, is now becoming nearly impossible to sustain. The threats are now too pronounced and immediate to ignore, even if it means risking diplomatic friction and economic consequences. The white paper justifies a significant increase in defense spending and calls for a more robust, proactive military posture to safeguard the nation. It argues that peace can no longer be assumed. Instead, it must be actively defended through vigilance, preparedness, and international cooperation. The document is a clear call to action, framing the challenges ahead as urgent and demanding a unified national response. It lays the groundwork for major policy shifts and legislative changes that Japan now sees as essential for its survival and continued prosperity. The message is unmistakable. The old status quo is over, and Japan is entering a new, more assertive chapter in its history. China is Japan's largest neighbor, and its biggest security concern. The 2025 White Paper highlights China's rapid military buildup and assertive foreign policy. Beijing's Navy, Air Force, and missile arsenal have grown dramatically. The most visible flashpoint, the Senkaku Islands, administered by Japan but claimed by China. Chinese Coast Guard and militia vessels regularly enter these waters, escalating tensions. Japanese Coast Guard patrols are now a daily high-stakes mission. In the air, Chinese military flights near Japan have become routine, testing response times and projecting power. Japan's Air Self-Defense Force scrambles jets almost daily. These actions wear down Japan's forces and threaten key sea lanes and U.S. bases. Japan also worries about China's intentions in the South China Sea and its rhetoric on Taiwan. A conflict over Taiwan could disrupt trade and spill into Japanese territory. For Tokyo, China's rise is a daily, multidimensional challenge. The risk of miscalculation is ever present. To the north, Japan faces Russia, a relationship complicated by a decades-old territorial dispute over the northern territories. Russia's recent military buildup on these islands, including missile deployments and exercises, has turned a diplomatic issue into a direct security threat. Russian and Chinese forces now conduct joint patrols near Japan, stretching its defenses. The war in Ukraine shattered hopes for a diplomatic resolution and led Japan to join G7 sanctions against Russia. Moscow responded by designating Japan as unfriendly, freezing dialogue. Russia is now seen not just as a difficult neighbor but as an aggressive actor aligned with China. The sight of Russian and Chinese warships together near Japan is a stark warning. Japan must now prepare for coordinated threats on multiple fronts. The old dispute has become a new danger. The stakes for Japan's security have never been higher. North Korea, though small, causes immediate alarm in Japan. Its relentless missile tests, some flying over Japan, trigger emergency alerts and public fear. North Korea's arsenal now includes short-range, cruise, and hypersonic missiles, making detection and interception harder. The threat of a nuclear-tipped missile is Japan's nightmare, forcing heavy investment in missile defense. Pyongyang's nuclear program continues, with a possible seventh test looming. North Korea's growing ties with Russia, trading weapons for technology and support, undermine sanctions and embolden Kim Jong-un. This alliance between a rogue state and a nuclear power is deeply destabilizing. Japan faces a direct, unpredictable threat on its doorstep. The danger is immediate and evolving. Japan now faces a new axis: China, Russia, and North Korea. Their cooperation isn't a formal alliance, but it's growing deeper and more coordinated. Joint military drills, naval patrols, and bomber flights around Japan are now routine. These actions improve their ability to operate together, forcing Japan to prepare for multi-front threats. Diplomatically, China and Russia shield North Korea at the UN and provide economic lifelines. This three-way partnership emboldens each member, increasing regional instability. Japan can no longer treat these threats separately. The combined challenge is unprecedented in Japan's modern history. The security environment is more complex and dangerous than ever. Japan is undergoing a profound transformation in its defense policy, driven by the growing threats and uncertainties in the region. The government and lawmakers are now facing the reality that the security environment has changed dramatically, requiring a new approach. The era of minimal reactive defense is over. For decades, Japan relied on a strictly defensive posture, maintaining only the bare minimum military capability. Now, the government is taking bold steps, doubling defense spending to 2% of GDP by 2027. This move will bring Japan in line with NATO standards and marks the largest increase in defense funding since World War II. New investments include acquiring long-range counter-strike missiles and advanced defense systems, representing a major shift away from Japan's traditional defense-only stance and signaling a willingness to deter threats before they reach Japanese soil. The US-Japan alliance remains the cornerstone of Japan's security, now stronger and more integrated than ever before, with both nations working closely to address new challenges. Joint planning and military exercises with the United States have become more complex and frequent, reflecting the deepening cooperation between the two allies. The US has repeatedly reaffirmed its commitment to defend Japan, including the disputed Senkaku Islands, sending a clear message to potential adversaries. At the same time, Japan recognizes it must take greater responsibility for its own security and become a stronger, more proactive partner in the alliance. This dramatic shift has sparked heated debate over Article 9 of the Constitution, which famously renounces war and prohibits Japan from maintaining armed forces for warfare. Some argue that Article 9 is outdated and must be revised to reflect today's realities. Others worry that changing it could open the door to a return to militarism and undermine Japan's post-war identity. The debate over Japan's identity, its responsibilities, and its role on the global stage is more intense than ever, dividing politicians, experts, and ordinary citizens alike. The nation now stands at a historic crossroads, torn between its pacifist past and the need for a more assertive, proactive future in a rapidly changing world. The choices Japan makes today will define its place in an increasingly dangerous world, shaping its security, alliances, and national identity for generations to come. Japan's security is a global issue. As the world's fourth-largest economy and a key US ally, instability here would send shockwaves worldwide. The sea lanes around Japan are vital for global trade and energy supplies. Any conflict would disrupt these routes, with catastrophic economic fallout. Nations everywhere have a stake in keeping these waters open and secure. Japan's response to threats is a model for other democracies in Asia. Its efforts to build a free and open Indo-Pacific inspire countries like the Philippines, Vietnam, and Taiwan. Japan's partnerships with Australia, India, and Europe are building a network to uphold international law. The region's future hinges on whether democracies can stand together. The struggle is between a rules-based order and authoritarian revisionism. Japan's choices will test the resilience of the democratic world. The world is watching. Japan stands at a historic crossroads. The era of post-war peace has ended. New dangers demand new strategies. The 2025 White Paper is a declaration. Japan must shape its own destiny. Japan is building military strength and reinforcing its US alliance to deter aggression. The goal: make any attack on Japan too costly to attempt. At the same time, Japan pursues diplomacy, dialogue, crisis communication, and coalition building across the Indo-Pacific. Military strength alone isn't enough. Lasting peace requires international cooperation and respect for law. The balance between deterrence and diplomacy is delicate. The choices made now will determine whether Northeast Asia finds stability or remains a flashpoint. Japan's future and the region's hangs in the balance.